So here's a question I've got for you. How many of you love a good story? Anybody? Everybody does, right? Everybody that I know loves story. My mom was a storyteller. She literally was a storyteller. She was a school librarian. She had gone and gotten training for how to tell stories. She had hand puppets galore and kind of taught me some of that so that I really enjoy telling stories. We like it from early on. Parents, any of you who are a parent now, who've been a parent, how many times have it's been late at night, you're putting your kid to bed, and how many times has your child said, "Mama, tell me about your day at work"? Nobody says that, right? They say, "Mama, tell me a story." And when we grow up, we don't quit, do we? We watch TV, we go to movies, we read books, we do all these things. We get together at parties and talk about what's going on in our life because we never tire of a good story. Well, the past several weeks that I've been with you, we've been talking about the opportunity that you and I have to share literally the greatest story of them all. The best of the stories. The good news about a God who created a world perfectly, about a God who redeemed a world that had gone astray, about a God who came to this world and became our Savior, about a God who forgives our sin and sets us free. You know the parts of this story. And what a wonderful blessing we have to share this greatest of all stories with the people around us. We call that evangelism. And for the last 2 weeks that I've been with you, I was out last Sunday, but for the 2 weeks before that, we've been talking about sincere evangelism. That is simply telling your story of how God has touched your life. I've been asking you to be thinking about that. You've given me now several weeks. I asked you to start thinking about what your story really is. How has God worked in your past? How is God working in your life right now? How do you believe God is going to be working in the years to come, in your future? That's a great story to share with somebody. And then I've been asking you to think. Just to think, not to actually go out and do it yet, but just to think about all the people around you who you could share with. Just to begin praying and ask God to help you be open and sensitive to the opportunities in your world, in your circle, to be able to share the good news. But now, today, I want to take you one step further. I'm still not sending you out. I'm still not, we're taking this slow, little bitty steps here. But today I want you to believe, I want you at least to begin to believe that you have a good story and that your story is powerful. I want you to begin to believe that you have a story that can change a life. Listen to these scriptures. I'm going to confess I've got three verses, and I don't do this often, but I'm pulling them from different places. Okay, I'm stringing them together, but I think you'll understand why. I think you'll see the little pattern in here. The first comes from Mark chapter 16, verse 15. Now just kind of listen. You can write them down, but it's going to take you time, so just listen. Jesus, it was nearing the end of his ministry. He was talking to his disciples, giving them last instructions. Jesus said to them, "Go into all the world and preach the good news to all creation." Go into all the world and preach the good news to God's creation. Now the second verse comes just a short time later. It's found in Acts chapter 5, verse 42. And here we find that the disciples are doing that. They're trying to do exactly what Jesus has asked them to do. It says, day after day in the temple courts and from house to house, they never stopped teaching and proclaiming the good news that Jesus is the Christ. And then we go just a little further. This is in Acts chapter 14, verse 21. Because when you go, you got to believe, and you start to share, you got to believe it's going to make a difference. And so some of the disciples were just in one town. It says they preached the good news in that city, and they won a large number of disciples. That was the pattern of the early church. You see, the single most important thing that God called his disciples to do was to share in all the world the good news, to share their good news. He didn't want them to be theologians. That would come long, many years and even centuries at times later. They didn't have to have all the answers. It was all right if they were timid and scared and nervous at times. They had the Spirit of the living God in them. He didn't want them to be perfect. He just wanted them to be themselves. He just wanted them to share their story. Because see, Jesus knew that their story was powerful, that their story was real. And he knew that if they simply shared what they had experienced, the things they knew, if they simply told others how God had touched and changed their life, that God could use that story, and when people listen, he could use it to change lives. That is the most important thing next to worship that we as a congregation do. We need to remember that Jesus did not send his disciples out to build hospitals to take care of the sick. He did not send them out to build churches, to build the buildings. He did not send them out to build schools, to educate. He did not send them strictly into prisons to reach out to the outcasts. He sent them to all the world to make disciples, and all these other things, as important as they are secondary to telling a good story. That's our job today. That's sincere evangelism. Now, you've got some questions, you've got some doubts. I know you do. I can just, anytime I talk, it's kind of like stewardship. Stewardship, I know you guys hate those sermons. Evangelism, you almost hate them as much. You tense up. I can see it at times where you look down. You really don't want to make eye contact with the preacher when I'm about to send you out there into the world. And I know what some of you are thinking, because I thought it for the longest time myself. Brother Jim, you don't get it. My story is pretty boring. I mean, I don't have anything exciting to share. Now, that's what you believe when you've gone to these really great revivals, and they've got these great preachers who have these just tremendous stories. You know, these guys who have fallen off a 500-foot cliff and didn't break a bone. These people who rolled a car 52 times and came out without a scratch. These people who just had these amazing experiences. They've just seen God everywhere, and you're just shriveling. You're getting smaller and smaller. Said, I don't have anything like that to share. I should have been bad or something. I don't know what happened. I used to think that until I realized one day that my story doesn't have to be really, really, really grand to be powerful. I used to think I had to have that kind of story. And when God was first calling me, he said, I don't know what I'm supposed to say. My testimony is boring. A kid grows up in Magnolia. A kid grows up in the church all of his life. Kid never knew anything but Jesus. Kid gave his life to Christ. But in the right place, in the right context, at the right moment to the right person, I'm exactly what somebody needs to hear. There's going to be another boring person out there in the world, another person who's not done anything wrong, who's tried to live right, who just needs to hear my story. And there's someone else, a different person, who needs to hear your story, or yours, or yours. All we need to believe, and deeply believe, is that we've got a good story to share, and it's our story. And there's somebody who's going to want to hear it. The second thing I want you to be thinking today, though, I want you to wait until God gives you just the right opportunity. Now, you can tell right away that my gift is not evangelism. How many of you have ever heard evangelists use the word wait with evangelism? They don't do it, right? It's always go. Go into all the world. Go and make disciples. Go, not wait. If you have the gift of evangelism, That is a very specific spiritual gift. If you have the gift of evangelism, then by all means go into the world. Go and do it, because you have the ability to make things happen, to open the doors, to reach out to people who aren't necessarily ready. You have that gift and that ability. But for the rest of us, it's going to be a whole lot better if you just wait. Just ask God to convince you that your story is good. Ask God to open your eyes so you can see, when the time is right, the person who could most benefit from your story. Be open and willing. You're not hiding from anything. You're not running. You're not trying to avoid anything. You're open, you're ready, but you're going to wait for that right moment. See, for most of you, I know, I've gotten this. Most of you are not evangelists at heart. And in that very specific sense, neither am I. So the worst thing I could do is to send you out and turn you into a bunch of pushy people. Pushy people turn people off. I don't want you to get in people's face. You don't have to do that. You don't have to. Just wait for the right time for God to come touch you. If you sneeze and someone says, "God bless you," don't say, "No, God bless you, son of Adam or daughter of Eve." That's going to be that's just going to be kind of weird for them. You don't have to do that. If somebody comes up to you one day and says, hey, what are you doing after supper tonight? Don't say no. The question is, what are you doing when you die? That's the question. They're going to be running from you really fast. If you're outside and you're walking your pet and somebody comes up and says, "Hey, that's a nice dog," don't say, "Hey, did you know the dog spelled backwards is God? And God is man's best friend too?" That's just strange. That's pushy. Don't do it. Wouldn't it be so much better just to live your life and keep living your story and wait for that moment and believe that God will lead you to the right person? And when it happens, then you just tell what you know, and it's easy. Here's the last thing that I want to tell you today as we just begin. Hey, listen, I am going to send you out real soon, okay? I'm not going to just keep preparing you forever. We're going to have to do this someday. But before that happens, I want you this week, and this is what I want you to do up front. You can begin to do this now. I want you to pray. Pray with fervor that God will take the fear out of your heart. That God will take the fear out of your heart. There have been some studies, and while not all of them have come up with exactly the same thing, most studies have said, it's kind of interesting to me, that the number one reason that Christians today say they don't want to go out and evangelize is because they are afraid of rejection. Does that ring true for anybody? They're afraid of what other people will think. They're afraid of how someone will react. They're afraid that if they start sharing something that personal as faith in Christ, that the people are going to just walk away and turn their back. They're afraid of rejection. I've got to tell you that fear comes when you don't understand just how good your story is, and when you don't understand how powerful it is, and when you don't wait for God's timing. That fear will dissolve. It will go away when you know the kind of story you've got to share. By the way, the number two reason that what I've seen that most people don't like to share the gospel is that they're afraid of the questions. They're afraid that somebody's going to ask them a question and they don't know the answer. They're going to look or feel stupid. Now, let me tell you something. It's my experience that if you're simply telling your story, no one follows it up with a theological question. They may agree, they may disagree, but they don't immediately start challenging you. But even if they do, even if they ask you a question, just be honest. It's perfectly okay to say, that's a great question. I don't know either. That's a great one, and I need to find the answer. But here's what I do know. And you go right back to the part of the story you can tell. Once I was like this, now I'm like this. Once I felt this way, now I feel this way. Well, once I thought I was by myself, now I know God is with me. You just tell your story. Listen, this past weekend, a week ago, I had an opportunity to put all this into practice. Y'all gave me permission to be off, and Jessica, thank you again for filling in. While I had a chance to go to the Washita River Correctional Institute in Malvern, the prison there, and along with 30 other men, we spent 4 days from Thursday through Sunday with 30 of the inmates in that prison. They were there for a reason. They had done bad things, and they knew it, and they were paying a price. They got it. They understood it. But I got to tell you that when I went there, my stereotypes were blown away. I went there with some fear. I've walked in jails before, but I'd never walked into a prison in my life. The doors didn't clang, by the way we think they do. It was different. That was just the first thing that was different. When I got in that room, and we got into our tables or talking with the specific people we were pairing up with and working with, what I found were lonely men. I found hurting men. I found men who were starving for attention, starving for someone to call them by a first name, starving for love, starving for hope in ways I had never seen before. Nobody they felt cared. Yes, there were victims. Yes, there were people hurt, but in that setting, God had given me an opportunity. I went in there kind of wondering if anybody would listen to the words of a middle-aged preacher who's never set his foot in prison, never been arrested, doesn't have a clue what's going on. I didn't have to worry. They were so hungry. The time was right. I didn't have to force. They didn't ask me a single theological question. They just listened to my story. And I told them what God had done in my life. And I told them what God is going to do in my life. Friends, starving people, they eat. Thirsting people, they drink it in. When you have the chance, just tell your story. God will give you the opportunity. There's a world of people around us. They're hurting. They're lonely. They're struggling. Some of them are scared. Some of them are confused. Some of them have gotten caught in a downward spiral of sin that's just tearing their lives apart. They don't know what to do. Some have never grown up with Christ. And you don't have to go to prison to find them. They are around us today. God knows about them. God loves them and cares for them. And God's got a lot more than just you. A lot of witnesses. He'll pick the right one for the right person. But there will be a time God will call you by name and say, it's your turn. I need you to go here. Will you be ready? Will you be open? Will you believe that your story is powerful? That's our job as the church. God has called you into His story. God will give you the task that you are made for. Be open. Be excited. Look around and be aware of what is God's doing in your life. Be open to using your talents, your story to change a life. May God the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit bless, preserve, and keep each of you now and always. Go in peace.